How good can we become at taking care of one another? If we can determine the best ways to support our people, what kinds of communities do you think we can build? In 2020, a global moment of crisis was met with a collective response, where people came together to meet each other's needs. We called that mutual aid. You might have helped someone get a mask, passed out hand sanitizer, or shared groceries. But the story of mutual aid is much longer than that, and we believe it has the ability to radically reshape our communities for the better. This is a story of ordinary, working-class communities building power through self-organization. It's a story about empowerment and what happens when people decide to save themselves instead of waiting to be rescued.
Yeah, woke up in the morning and I smelled the fresh pollution. Television never tried to show my execution.
Said, who's this? Just a kid from the neighborhood. I've been trying to start a revolution for the greater good.
It's the revolution coming, marching on your street. Always use your voice for the ones who cannot speak.
It's the ones who go to war from the belly of the beast. And I'm coming from the underground, you hear it in my speed. Yeah, bitty bitty boom boom, bitty bitty bang. This the type of music that make people go and sing. Say bitty bitty boom boom, bitty bitty bang. This the type of music that make people go and sing.
Before we begin, we want to share a bit about the process. What you're watching wasn't made by professional filmmakers, just a small crew who wanted to make a tool that would help more people connect with the movement for mutual aid. This started as a much smaller project in 2018, but as the movement grew through the pandemic, the message that needed to be shared grew too. Even after collecting interviews with over 70 people, this series is still just a small piece in the story of mutual aid. This 4-part series calls upon the natural elements to help us tell this story. Fire introduces mutual aid as the spark of our humanity, which those in power try to stomp out. Earth teaches us how to grow projects capable of meeting our community's needs. Water shows us how collective healing can be a tool of resistance. And air breathes life into the logistics of our organizing, like how we make decisions and get resources. We'll meet a number of different mutual aid projects and community members along the way, and a chorus of friends appearing throughout the series will help us break down some of the harder questions. In this first chapter, we'll ask 3 questions. How do we define mutual aid? How is mutual aid different than charity? And why is mutual aid at odds with the ruling class? So let's start from the very beginning. What is mutual aid?
First question. Can you define mutual aid in just a couple words?
No. I don't know. Not like that succinct.
All right. I have been thinking about this one.
Can certainly try. Mutual aid, in just a few words, to me, is people coming together with the resources they have to take care of themselves and each other together. Stone soup.
I would define mutual aid as a sort of community-based system wherein people in a community sort of share resources and skills to take care of each other rather than focusing on outside help.
And make society in a way that it should be, actually for the people and not for any one individual.
Not only helping the people, but being a part of the community, forming a relationship with the community. And it's not just like a tax write-off or this is what we did, make sure you advertise it.
Just taking care of each other communally, like living in community, having some sort of power back in our lives and how we live our lives. That's what I would say is mutual aid, yeah, for me, yeah.
A means to an end, a tactic within a specific strategy, a tool, and the end itself that we're building towards, and just a fact of nature. And sometimes I feel like folks can get caught up in like one understanding, one of these facets, and that can almost kind of limit our scope of what it is and what's possible.
People helping each other, that we're all in this together, and this being life, this being the crisis of the moment, this being, whatever, that we're in it together, and if we don't help each other, we won't survive.
To me, mutual aid is just meeting each other's needs such that you're more accountable to each other's values than to the state. When you are getting your needs met by the state, then we are accountable to their values, whether we like it or not, or whether or not we agree with those values. When you can get those needs met with other people, then you are now accountable to each other's values instead.
This might be your first time hearing the term mutual aid, but you can recognize it all around you in your day-to-day activities. Whenever you check in on your neighbors, watch someone's kids, or cook a meal for your friend who just had surgery, you're bringing the elements of mutual aid to life. In fact, mutual aid is as old as life itself, and is part of how many species of animals, plants, and fungi have always survived.
Yat she kli dashijine torich eatni shabashish chin auto nakudine dashinella shama be'eth chi auto be'eth chi dashiche nile zithijin de nasha auto conflanish shahawan. For Dene, we have a teaching and principle and understanding of relationality to our cosmos, so to all relations, to the spirit, the collectivity of humanity, non-human beings, to the land, which is articulated as K'eh. This understanding comes with teachings of what the responsibilities of K'eh are in relation to how we are to be with each other, how we take care of each other, how we take care of the land. So it's nothing new. This is an old way of being and has continued and has been interrupted and faced many violent ruptures.
Human history is rich with examples of communities managing their needs collectively. We can see it when we observe examples like indigenous land stewardship, self-governing maroon societies, Black mutual aid formations, survival programs, and strike funds. Mutual aid has been practiced as a value, but it's also an essential way that people endure when conditions change for better or for worse.
The Black Panther Party did the first nationwide free sickle cell anemia testing. I saw that. I saw the organizing against police brutality. We had free health clinics that we ran. People could come and get free health care. One of the programs we also had was the free busing to prisons program. Once a month, we would take people up there to visit their family members. And at the time, a lot of the brothers who were in the Black Panther Party, a lot of them had been locked up or didn't have a driver's license. So the women had to do a lot of the driving. So I had a valid driver's license, so I would drive one of the vans up to Jackson State Prison. The breakfast program was really very instrumental in winning over a lot of people in the Black community to the Black Panther Party, because everybody in the Black community was not in love with Black Panthers walking through the community with guns. If anybody tells you that, that's not true. When the Black Panther Party started having these breakfast programs, feeding kids on school days before they went to school, this was a revolutionary program because here was a small organization at that time just starting that was feeding children, and they were addressing hunger in the Black community. This got the community's attention. And this won the Black Panther Party a lot of support. So I came to understand that programs like this, it helped us change people's thinking. We talked about survival pending revolution. We actually need to be doing it not as an emergency, but as a constant way of life. And it's a hard thing to do because we're all taught to be self-sufficient in the United States. That's how we're raised. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, do your own thing. And that's how I was too. It was hard for me to accept mutual aid at first because I felt like I was failing, but I came to understand that I was not failing. These were conditions that were being imposed on us.
In the crisis that we faced of the beginning stages of the pandemic on the Nefakea or the Navajo Nation, we were one of the hardest hit places in the so-called US. But there's a context and history to that, because our people faced scorched earth campaigns by the federal government to attack our food systems. Before colonization, we never knew what a food desert was. Before colonization, we didn't know what poverty was. We didn't know what the police were. We didn't know what prisons were. The goal is, when we start with mutual aid, to me, and then continue to nurture that. It's not an ending point. To me, it's not a revolutionary point, but it's a process of liberation, of a way of being without having to fuck each other over and competing and perpetuating this mythology from European Enlightenment of the survival of the fittest.
White supremacy has taught us that our default nature is greed and competition, but our nature is much more complex. Under the structures of capitalism, the skills that emerge from cooperation and consensus are easily lost. Let's visit a group of young organizers who are relearning these aspects of collectivity and putting them into practice.
So basically, it's cold as hell. So how we kind of try and mob this is put out the stuff, let people go in, and if it's really dwindling, we dip. You know what I'm saying? And I think what we'll do is normally it's 2 people manning 2 things. So it's a little hard to keep track. So I'll try. I only got the clothes, you got the window kits. So I think I'll try and have one person at each bin or something. Okay. And we'll just kind of play it by ear a little bit. So what you want at the table?
When you talk about a collective form of liberation or collective form of work, mutual aid is one of the pillars that's the backbone of any type of revolutionary act, because people need care, people need food, people need that type of close-knit community to make sure that they can rest and do the work consistently and sustainably. For me, George Floyd was kind of the gateway for a lot of people for activism. And I remember just going to a march, and while I was marching, just not feeling productive. I was okay, to what end? And some of the individuals that were at the march just were not really people who actively practice solidarity in the way that I thought that it should be practiced. And so one thing led to another, and I just started to look for alternatives and I didn't have the vocabulary at the time, but to sustainably engage with community in a way that made sense for me to constantly do it as an everyday practice. One thing led to another, and kind of started off with a bunch of hodgepodge activists, people in the community who wanted to do the work. And eventually, Eastside Mutual Aid was formed.
There was a certain point in my life where, how do I not give you my whole origin story like a Marvel movie? There was a certain point where I've always been kind of curious about the world and everything, and I've always wanted to know more. Eventually got to a point where I was okay, I can keep reading by myself, and I can keep hearing people theorize and do all this shit. But at a certain point, what's really going on? What are we really doing here? Eventually, I just started looking for organizations around Detroit. A friend of a friend introduced me to Juwan, and he asked me to join. I said, yeah.
Eastside Mutual Aid is a mutual aid group actively practicing and striving for a horizontal communalism.
We do distributions of various resources towards, I'm not even gonna just say disenfranchised people, I'm just gonna say people. That's me, the people we serve at Rosa Parks, friends, family, anything we got, we try and give.
So we actively do toiletries, food distribution, and have done different pop-ups around the Detroit and Metro Detroit area, along with special targeted asks slumlord evictions, rehousing of individuals, and flood relief, things of that nature. So.
The fact that we are not trying to be this hierarchical thing and tell people that their ideas are wrong and what they can bring isn't worth it is very eye-opening to a lot of people, because even in charity work, in some shape or form, you're doing it for the sake of a vague purpose. You know what I mean? And I feel like with mutual aid and other political organizations, there is no, well, there shouldn't be a vague purpose. You know what I mean? The purpose is for freedom, liberation. Essentially, like if you feel like you're going in and you're the only one doing everything and it feels like a job and you don't want to be there, I might say that that's a telltale sign you're not really doing what you think you're doing.
And I know a lot of people kind of like say this and mean it in a bunch of different ways, but for me, like, it really is just like a tenet, like it's an ethos, it is a lifestyle that you embody because you hold it so close to your heart. Sometimes when you go and do distribution, at least for me, and it's fucking freezing outside, and you're like, damn, nigga, I really don't want to do this right now. But you still do it because like you believe in it and you know that the work is important to be done. For me, I think it started off as this sort of compulsory, like, I need to do something to feel productive in my community. But as I've grown a bit more in the work, it has changed into we need to do it sustainably. So originally, when we showed up to Rosa Parks, we just, through time and tenure, we built up these relationships. So we know people by names, we communicate with them in a way that we know, hey, Avery wants us to bring this specific knapsack, or like Angie wants to be the person who helps distribute us goods at the table. Through these relationships, we started to move towards a more generalized meeting. So we held our first general meeting late last year, and it allowed people to more directly kind of come together, be in a place where they could directly vocalize their needs without having to run and try to catch the bus. So as we continuously practice these type of general meetings or communal assemblies, we're hoping the bridge between like people who do, for lack of a better term, the more like behind the scenes administrative work with EMA and the community lessons, and like there's more integration. So we're really excited about that, and we really believe in that model to promote that container of communalism and bridge those gaps.
Careful right there. It's ice.
We'll just take these all in.
The clips and stuff is going in the station area.
Oh, you brought it? Okay.
Alright, does mutual aid always have to be labeled mutual aid?
Oh, this is a good ass question. So no, we have a list of intake questions for our volunteers, right? And I practice them on like my family and just like niggas on the block. And when one of the questions is like, how would you define mutual aid? They're like, what is mutual aid to you? And they like, you, nigga, you. And I'm just like, no. Like, what is mutual aid? It's like, I mean, I guess community work. And I'm just like, wow. And it really kind of like made us take a step back on like kind of like the theory thumper language and just be like, wow, you know, mutual aid takes so many shapes and forms, and what does it mean to be like accessible and like see that practice in like the everyday? It can look as simple as knowing that like, yo, Mrs. Wright get home around 8 p.m. every day, but like we ain't really seen her and it's getting kind of late. Like, what does that look like? Who do we call? And then it can also look like in a more intentional organizational way, like maybe how we do it or some of our partners do it as well in the ecosystem. So
sometimes I think there should be like a Black Panther admin guide of like someone who was doing all of that, like the boring ass day-to-day shit that went on, because it gets like really like mythologized almost. It's really just like day-to-day stuff, you know? And that's the part where I think I really want people to kind of like take away from that. The day-to-day, the mundane of trying to prepare and build for the better future is really that work, you know what I mean? That's the part that is important. It's not it's the non-sexy part of it. I feel, you know, anytime I tell people I'm part of it, they're like, oh my goodness. And I'm like, dude, sometimes I'm just like filling out Google Docs and like onboarding people and having a meeting and trying to like get people, you know, on the same page and talking and everything. So mutual aid doesn't need to be called mutual aid, I think I might caveat that with, but it needs to be purposeful. This is like pretty new to me. I think I've only been doing it for like maybe 2 years at this point. So I'm still like figuring out, like, and I think that's the part that I really appreciate, where it's like, you don't have to come in here like knowing everything, because you're just like never gonna be prepared. Like, you just aren't. You do not have to be some type of like theory thumper ass nigga where like you just know everything out the get-go. You do not have to be that. You could be regular as hell and really just want to be antithetical to the system in which you're under. Start there, find people like that, and like keep learning and keep doing, and like I think the rest will sort itself out for sure. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
So this kind of work doesn't always have to be labeled mutual aid. But we should note that some people use the phrase in ways that differ from what we're talking about. The term has been used by different types of groups across generations for well over 100 years. It's a central tenet of the Mennonite faith. Preppers talk about it, and many governmental agencies have so-called mutual aid agreements between their jurisdictions, specifically the police.
And when we talk about working with them, we talk about words like mutual aid. And maybe we can help explain what that word means, and then you guys will get a better picture of what we're talking about.
Mutual aid, it's kind of a way for cities to help each other out, and it gives us additional resources to draw from, especially if our resources are limited to some extent.
With SWAT, I work with SWAT, and I work with a couple of Cotch Grove guys, and we see each other all the time, and it's so great because then when you hear their radio number or you hear their voice or you see them on a call, it's very comfortable.
Yeah. No matter what patch we have on our sleeve, we're all out there trying to, we have the same goal in mind.
In 1973, the National Sheriff's Association published a report that made it clear. It said, police mutual aid is not a new concept. The report pushed to formalize more mutual aid agreements between jurisdictions to deploy manpower, weapons, and other resources to crack down on the social uprisings that had exploded during the 60s. They even built riotsvilles, or mock towns, across the country so they could practice and develop new crowd control tactics. When we use the term mutual aid throughout this series, we're talking about communities supporting each other, not institutional agreements and policies that harm our communities. You might be wondering at this point, what makes mutual aid any different from charity? It's all just helping people out, right? But mutual aid and charity are distinct in some really important ways. So what exactly makes them different?
Mutual aid is different from charity because mutual aid focuses much more on a community helping itself out and people having sort of agency over their own lives, rather than charity, which tends to be outside people and outside sort of powers sort of bestowing things on a community that they might necessarily be a part of.
Charity is about keeping systems and structures in place. It's taking power away, whereas mutual aid is giving power back.
There's this meme that I would love to show you where it's like, you got like that emoji and he's like, and it's like me when the mutual aid is mutual, because so oftentimes I find that it's not. And there's like people who say that they're doing mutual aid, but like they're just like pulling up and doing something for people. And then the mutual part is that they then get to feel good about themselves. And I'm not talking about like the nonprofit people either. Like I'm talking about like people who would call themselves anarchists or communists or this, that, or the whatever.
I think of charity as being the helper and the helped are really separate from each other. Whereas with mutual aid, it's like reaching across. It doesn't necessarily mean like I do this for you and you do that for me. It doesn't have to be 100% reciprocal, but it's the idea that there are things that I have that I can give, whether that is like concrete physical items or emotional support, and there are other things that other people can give, and that we're all just giving what we can and taking what we need in a way that builds community and that doesn't separate helper from helped.
A book called The Revolution Will Not Be Funded introduced a concept known as the nonprofit industrial complex. In it, the authors break down the ways that charity has become an industry, inflated with money, but still maintaining the class divide of haves and have-nots. It comes from a long history of colonialism that's forced people to depend on the church and the state instead of building self-sustaining, independent communities.
I think it's important to analyze what we're doing when we talk about mutual aid. Are we replicating the work that charities like churches have perpetuated to make dependent poor or other marginalized or vulnerable communities? Some skepticism is necessary when there's a lot of profiteering and exploitation that occurs. A lot of nonprofits have just jumped on the bandwagon and used the term mutual aid and applied it to fucking everything because they can write grants and use a sexy term that people are passionate about and mobilize volunteers when all their staff are getting paid like high dollars. It's just reinforcing the state. It's reinforcing a system of exploitation that's antithetical to mutual aid.
The state is not without its guile, and what it did and what it has done is created their own organizers. Too many so-called leftists and radicals are going into conventional politics, and that's been part of the problem. Too many of them are being bribed by corporations. Corporations give millions of dollars in grant money to so-called leftist groups and so forth. We have to reject that. We have to build something new. We have to challenge these kinds of groups, have to challenge each other in order to build a new movement.
Mutual aid can only be co-opted so much. It really can't be co-opted fully. Implicitly, it is a threat to those power structures that are not compatible with the relationships that are necessary to be in right existence with all of creation. If we can embody that, then we are practicing liberation.
Radical forms of mutual aid challenge the underlying assumptions of the society, of the capitalist society, and those who are running the system. People start to understand that they can survive without the state and without the capitalist economy, and that there are other options. Just that alone is a threat to state security. That's one of the things I think people need to understand, is that it's not just giving people the food itself, it's giving people political education and organization to be able to do this after the emergency has gone past. Because with poor people, especially in the Black community and other communities of color, the emergency is always there. The emergency is poverty. All these years go by, we still got homelessness. It's continued and it's gotten bigger and bigger. And so every time there's a crisis, it gets bigger, it gets deeper. We need to talk about mutual aid becoming a radical turn to transform the whole of society. We can use it to fight back and resist capitalism and even overthrow capitalism.
Hold on, cut on the record. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, roll. Hey, we right here across from Mango. Right here, we're giving away stuff. As you can see, for the homeless, Vienna sausage, orange, Ritz crackers, food, and also, if you was to look around with the camera, we got some clothes on the inside. We be real on Auburn Avenue. Y'all come out, free clothes, food for the homeless, and we be happy to see y'all. You know what I'm saying? Hey, right now, we're gonna pass out more food. I'm gonna pass out more food. We've got to take a commercial break and we'll be right back. 9, 5, 4, 3, commercial break. Cut.
Soul Underground is an abolitionist ecosystem based out of Atlanta. We're dedicated to Black and Indigenous resistance and building alternatives to systems of oppression and domination and hierarchy. Our goal is to build solidarity between working class and unhoused folks. Soul is an autonomously run collective, meaning we don't have any presidents or lead organizers or directors or anything that nonprofits typically have or companies typically have. So everything we do is just led by the communities that are impacted. We work with the direction from the unhoused community, and we do that through our winter warming stations. We have 2 free stores, 3 deliveries. We also do it through community building, so meals, events, things like that.
I'm driving around, delivering groceries to folks who we've known, most of them, for a year or more, and everybody is someone that I would say, except for like one person, is people that we met on the street, doing free store and doing other programs, and built a relationship with, and then kind of, kept up with them and stayed with them while they got housing. A couple of the people that I'll see today are like interested in like, organizing, and this is something that we've like talked to people about, for like years, but people have like expressed pretty consistently that it's just very hard for them to do things like that while they're still living on the street.
When we want to start a project, we usually just workshop it with the people who would be most impacted. With the winter warming stations, it started with the idea to just go out and pass out like winter supplies that folks would need. And that's coming from like a group mostly made out of folks who had never experienced homelessness before. After we really got talking and like developed actual close friendships with folks, they said that the biggest need was heat, and not in the form of like hand warmers, but like actual like fires. Like people were starting fires with hand sanitizer, but folks knew that wasn't safe. So we looked up how to get a heater, and then we asked what would be the best times to come out, and then we kind of built that warming station around what folks said that they needed. And then it got to a point where it could be self-managed. Most of the time we just go to set up and we stay there just to make sure that the cops don't bother folks, but we feel confident in each other, like as a community, that people are going to be able to like self-manage in that way. There has to be that community and that trust, and there has to be a whole lot of consent and autonomy. And it's a long-going process. Like with us downtown, people weren't really, can I curse? Okay. People weren't really fucking with us for a long time, probably like, I'd say like 6 months. And it was because so many groups of people have come downtown to like help the homeless, and they've all left. That consistency, that kind of mutual part and mutual aid is so important.
It's hard for people to organize, because to organize you have to be in like one place, and you have to be with one group of people, and every time the cops come and sweep people, it's breaking up a community. It's you're destroying a community, really. Mutual aid and Soul is about building like, alternative systems of care that are outside of the state's purview, so that we can, get people the help they need, and build power with people. Because it doesn't have to be this way, and it's not always gonna be this way. And I think that, by working together and by building power in this way, it's like we're trying to like dream of a better future.
So a lot of what defines mutual aid is about helping each other out and building power while we're doing it. Who would have a problem with that? Well, the people at the top, who have spent a lot of time and energy amassing wealth to rule over us, actually don't like it when we find liberatory ways to politicize our interdependence. They thrive when we have to go through their economic and welfare systems and have no choice but to pay higher and higher rent and submit to their control. In fact, one of the ways they make sure we stay dependent on them is by extracting and withholding resources from our communities.
If I know that in this hotel room they have food every day, and I'm knocking on the door every day to eat, and they open the door, let me see the party, let me see like them throwing salami all over just like throwing food around. I'm standing outside trying to sing my way in. You know what I'm saying? We are hungry, please let us in. We are hungry, please let us in. After about a week, that song is gonna change to we hungry, we need some food. After 2-3 weeks, it's like, give me all the food, breaking out the door. And after a year, you just like, I'm picking the lock, coming through the door, blasting, you know what I'm saying? It's like you hungry, you reached your level, you don't want any more. We asked 10 years ago. We was asking with the Panthers. We was asking with them, with civil rights movement. We was asking. Now those people that were asking, they're all dead and in jail. So now what do you think we're gonna do?
A lot of people may associate mutual aid work with giving away donations, but it can also look like building power to take back what's been taken from us. Let's meet the final group in this chapter who did just that.
Mi nombre es Benito Flores, soy originario de México y llegué aquí en el año de 1986, pero fue en el 2005 cuando ya no pude pagar la renta. La renta estaba subiendo y mi calidad de vida iba disminuyendo hasta que llegó el momento en que ya no pude y tuve que empezar a vivir en un van. Entonces en 2020 me uní al movimiento de Reclamando Nuestros Hogares y tomamos 13 casas de las casas vacías de Caltran.
For decades, a fierce battle has raged over the 710 freeway extension through El Sereno, Pasadena, and South Pasadena.
One of the longest-running LA freeway debates in history.
The homes have sat vacant ever since plans to extend the 710 freeway was ended in 2018.
It displaced thousands of low-income and minority residents in its path.
Caltrans has shelled out more than $13 million, guarding more than 120 vacant homes, sitting empty in the middle of a housing crisis.
Publicly owned houses that have been vacant for years are now becoming shelter to the unhoused. I'm Tanya McCrae in El Sereno, where the Reclaiming Our Homes movement is in full effect.
A huge face-off overnight between the CHP and activists. This is in El Sereno. Officers started removing these people who were illegally living in the homes that are owned by Caltrans there.
Caltrans ahorita tiene como 170 casas vacías. 170 casas vacías por 50 años, en medio de una crisis de homeless. Cuando el gobernador dijo, quiero que toda la gente permanezcan en sus casas para evitar la pandemia. Y nosotros los homeless dijimos, ¿cuáles casas? ¿A cuál casa vamos a meternos para protegernos de la pandemia? Pues vamos a tomar las casas de Caltrans, que están vacías por 50 años.
I was living on the floor of a friend's house with my daughters. We did that for like over a year. And when I found out about Moms for Housing, I was like really looking of a way to do it here. And so I was reaching out to different people. At that same time, Angela Flores from the Eastside Cafe made kind of a similar call out. Them, ACE, and other organizations were already like planning this. We started meeting in December over the phone, and then in January in person. We were trying to set dates and getting to know each other. A lot of us didn't know each other, so we're trying to form like relationships.
I made the decision to join the movement because even if I was going to be arrested or even if it was going to be just for a few days, I still wanted to try. I wanted to have my kids back and have a normal life, like be a mom.
Nos organizamos a hacer la resistencia, a cómo ayudarnos mutuamente. Nos organizamos cómo convocar a mucha gente que nos vino a ayudar, a la prensa, cómo hablar con la policía, cómo hablar con los vecinos. Y entramos 13.
The same day that we decided to break in the homes, we also sent an email to Governor Newsom. We basically told him this is what is going on. We are a group of families that are looking to shelter in place. And because the pandemic is here, we are going to do this action.
That's when we really got connected with individuals and organizations from nonprofits and grassroots levels that were able to provide tangible resources that we really needed during that time, like opening the water for us or providing generators so we could have electricity.
The collectives that were aware of our movement, they all wanted to support and they gave us so many tools. So donations came to Benito's house. And it was everything. It was food, it was clothes, everything for your home. For a while, we had meals delivered. In some of the homes, we did have no power. We had battery packs that people would bring to me. that were being charged at Marta's, and so that's how I was able to get power.
Fue para mí como un cuento surrealista de la Cenicienta. Que después de ser homeless, de vivir en la calle por 14 años, estaba yo en una casa. Y los vecinos y la gente, en vez de enojarse conmigo, venían y me traían regalos.
We had to have a lot of defense network against the police and against harassment of neighbors that were against us, especially the people that are more traumatized or have children. We had like extra people in those homes.
Y estaba la gente fuera de nuestras casas en la calle apoyándonos, haciendo guardia para que la policía no viniera a molestarnos.
One time, the cops, they started like probing and like looking inside the windows, and one was in front, the other one went to the back. I got really scared because I thought they were gonna break it. And so I got on the phone really fast. And I said, I need support. And so people showed up really fast and said like, no, you guys are not supposed to go inside. You have orders just to be outside. And I really felt like this is community. This is what it feels like to be here.
Ante esa agresión, la gente se levanta y pelea. Esa es nuestra fuerza, la decisión de hablarle la verdad al poder. Ese es nuestro poder, y el otro poder es la unión. Cuando vimos que somos muchos y estamos sin casa, y nos unimos y pudimos convocar a mucha gente que se sintió identificada con nosotros, que si bien es cierto que no son homeless los que nos ayudaron, los que nos hicieron muchas donaciones, están luchando con el costo de la vida, están sufriendo por el costo de la vida y están sintiendo que están siendo empujados cada vez hacia la pobreza.
We've lost those connections and relationships on how to have mutual symbiotic relationships with each other through all these oppressions like patriarchy, capitalism, and white supremacy. So mutual aid to me means regaining that and relearning how to be humans and how to be part of the earth. As reclaiming our homes, I think we started that process by being able to not only reclaim homes that were vacant, but also building these networks of relationships with other organizations and with each other.
All the homes that we occupied, they became homes. We beautify them, we occupy them, we became like a family there. From there, I learned so much. It's not only that you reclaim this home, it's like we have options. You can stay here and we can negotiate that.
We need each other more than we need the system. A lot of times we rely too much on the system and it has a lot of failures. Sometimes we do have to break the law in order to really like show the injustices that are just like here in the system. I felt as a mom I really needed to like be brave enough to do this for my daughters and for other moms or parents that are in similar situations so that they know that they don't have to wait in line and wait for the scraps of the system.
We are human beings and we are worthy of deserving of more. We don't just want bread, we want roses of beauty and joy. So we deserve all that and more.
When we have strong networks of mutual aid supporting us, we're able to win fights we'd never dream of taking on as individuals. Reclaiming Our Homes members were able to stay in their rescued homes for 5 years, and their struggle for affordable, dignified housing isn't over. Of course, the rich and powerful aren't going to concede defeat easily. What's their response when we build collective power?
Why do you think there's not more mutual aid everywhere?
I think there's a lot of good people who really care about people and in so many different ways provide mutual aid, but I guess one of the reasons could be like the state. Anything that helps people thrive threatens the state because the people are no longer reliant on said state.
That's why the Black Panther Party with the survival programs was a threat because of that.
J. Edgar Hoover, who was the head of the FBI back in the 60s and 70s, he felt like the breakfast program, at one point he said it was the Black Panther Party's most dangerous program. You say, well, how could feeding people be dangerous? Well, Hoover was a racist, but he wasn't stupid. He understood what it meant if you were feeding people who need food and how you can get support. And so he was very clear on that being a dangerous program.
Instead of investing resources into food, education, and healthcare, Hoover and the FBI started the Counterintelligence Program, or COINTELPRO, an off-the-books project that lasted 15 years and spent billions of dollars infiltrating organizations and assassinating and slandering radicals. Their goal was to divide and defeat organizations, groups, and individuals that were empowering people. COINTELPRO is just one example of how far the state will go to keep marginalized communities hungry and dependent on it. Today, there's a new wave of repression. Mutual aid projects get evicted from spaces they're renting, the police bulldoze communal gardens, and anti-food sharing regulations are used to slap organizers with fines and charges. In Atlanta, forest defenders fighting a new Cop City training center were charged with felonies. The indictment against them used the term mutual aid 15 times and sets a dangerous precedent for all of us who want to take care of our communities on our own terms. We're quickly slipping into a more authoritarian, unstable reality, and many of us will have no choice but to fight back or fold into fascism. The good news is that fighting oppression and building strong communities can go hand in hand. We can learn from poor and working class people in Chile, Greece, Sudan, Indonesia, Palestine, northern Syria, and other places around the world whose resistance is sustained through squats, free medical clinics, communal kitchens, radical unions, and collective childcare. Right now, we have a choice to build up infrastructure that will support us as we fight for a world that we can survive in.
We cannot adapt to a system that's unsustainable. We could actually pave the way for a new way of living that's more sustainable and that really does require mutual aid. And when we realize that, I feel like as a community and as a people and like as a mass, then we're gonna be able to like create something new and abolish all these systems.
Someone that I don't like said on the phone to me, I don't believe in mutual aid. And it's just like, well, baby, it's happening. But that's just like one example of like, there's just this limited understanding. It's the tool, it's the tactic, it's the end, it's the goal, it's nature itself, yeah.
Janana, do you have anything to add around like a mandate for building community autonomy?
No, I don't really have anything to add. I'm good.
You don't? Oh, goodness, I'm shocked.
I don't.
Okay, I'll have to do the end of it then. She taught me the whole thing about we as organizers are part of the people. And so we build community resistance as well as community survival programs. We build those because we understand that the struggle comes from below. And because the struggle comes from below, then it becomes possible, if you have enough people pushing, that you can push your way through completely and push the people in power out of the way.
If I were to have a politics, it would be more of a politics of possibility. Possibility against despair in the face of extraordinary suffering and trauma. And that's the politics of healing. What I would like to see, or what you could call hope, is more of that it's cultivated, that those fires that have been lit aren't extinguished, that we find ways to support those who are in cages, that we support those who feel like their voices have been stripped away and silenced, those who are ripping up the fences, that we continue to be those when we can on the front lines to risk wherever they may be, or be the forces that make sure that they're fed and they have like all the PPE and all the shit that they need. Because that kind of shit, dirty, gritty work of just washing the fucking dishes, mopping the floors, constantly cleaning shit and taking care of like the basic shit people really don't think of, like the trash, all that basic little shit is fucking radical and beautiful and fucking amazing as fuck. I'm an abolitionist. I want to see the system be composted, and from the compost that we can grow in good, right relationship with each other to move forward to better ways of being for all existence. For me, that's the biggest element of it. It's just moving forward and looking at those smallest possibilities and making them grow.